With me is entertainment and sport lawyer Miss Carla Parris to speak a little bit about some of the things that we need to know about Carnival, some of the things that we need to know heading into Carnival. Today's discussion is about photographs and who owns the photographs. So first question is, what is copyright and how does that impact photographs taken?
Okay, so one of the first things that you need to understand is that copyright is a property right, and it exists in original literary and artistic creations. So Section 5 of the Copyright Act is clear. In fact, they have an enumerated list of categories that literary and artistic creations fall under, and photographs is one of them. And then when you're asking about the whole question of, well, who owns the photograph, we have to go back to the Copyright Act. And the Copyright Act states that the owner or creator of a work is the person who has in fact created it. So the photographer would be the owner of the photograph because he's the person that has actually captured the image.
So if I hire somebody to take these pictures, do I own the photos as the person who hired this person, or are the rights still to the photographer?
Okay, that's an excellent question. That comes up all the time in the season. In fact, it comes up just not even limited to Carnival time. It comes up with wedding photos and so on. And the distinction that we're looking at here is whether or not the photographer has been hired in the course of employment, so whether the photographer belongs to a company. And if the photographer belongs to a company, then the photos that have been taken by the photographer in the course of his or her employment automatically belong to the employer. But if you've hired the photographer, then we're talking about an independent contractor. And in an independent contractor type situation, the photographs, the copyright in the photographs still reside in the photographer. So you may be saying, but I paid for this. You know, I paid X amount of dollars, you know, to have this person come to my fete or come to my mass camp or come wherever to take these photos. And yes, you did. You paid for the service. So you are going to be able to own the photographs with respect to using it for your personal usage. But if you want to reproduce them in terms of modifying them, adapting them, trying to sell them or anything, or worse yet, insert your watermark and then claim ownership, that's where you've gone wrong. The copyright to the photos still belong to the photographer.
But is there any way that the person, the manager of, or the person who hired a photographer, any way that they can actually get the rights for these photos?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that would be by virtue of a written contract. Remember last week we were talking about the importance of contracts and so forth. So in a situation like this, if you wish to own the copyright in the photos, then you would need to enter into a written agreement with the photographer where he is assigning ownership of the photos to you. In essence, it would be, you've heard of the term buyout before? Essentially, it would be a buyout. And that's how a transfer of ownership would be effected.
So let's get onto the streets of a carnival. You know, these bands might have hired a photographer to take pictures, and in the process of taking pictures of the masqueraders in that band, they might end up taking photos of people on the streets and other masqueraders in that area. Mm-hmm. Is there, and if these pictures are placed, say, in a magazine or any publisher takes these photos and use them, are there anything in place for these people to say, you know, this is my picture, why is it here?
You're talking about the masqueraders whose images have been used? Okay, great. And this Rishi, is something that comes up often, you know? So the answer to that question is, in Trinidad and Tobago, once you're in a public place, so the masqueraders are in the streets and so on, in the parks and that type of thing, you're not in your home. You're not in a place with a boundary. We do not have in our country specific statutes or individual standalone statutes that speak to image rights. So an individual does not at this point in time have any sort of proprietary right in the use of their images, commercially or not. What we do have is the Protection Against Unfair Competition Act, which specifically speaks to celebrities and fictional characters. And it states that they have the right to seek redress in the event of the commercialization of their images. So as I said, it's celebrities, well-known persons, and so forth. They can say, well, look, my image has been used commercially. Why has my consent not been sought? But for you and I, the average person, the individual citizen, we don't have image rights. That's a U.S. construct. So in the United States, they have image rights legislation, publicity rights legislation, and so forth, which speak to the commercialization of your images. And in fact, in most Commonwealth countries, the situation remains just as in Trinidad and Tobago, where individuals don't have the right to make that particular claim.
You mentioned the term celebrity, but how can we define celebrity? Who is a celebrity in Trinidad?
Well, that's the thing. This whole question of who is a celebrity, who is a fictional character, we don't actually have any matters like this. The matters have not been tested in court. So it would then have to go to judges and so forth, and different factors would be taken into consideration. But usually celebrities are persons who have substantial goodwill, substantial reputation, and so forth, you know? And persons in the public would be able to recognize them based on their contribution to different sectors and so on, you know?
And then we come to the issue of the image release.
Yes.
Can you explain and give us some detail about what this is and how it operates?
Right. So a lot of people ask that question. They say, well, if individuals don't have the right to seek redress for the commercialization of their image, then why do companies use image right releases? For example, an advertising agency, a modeling agency, when they're hiring models and so forth to promote products, they usually enter into a written image rights release. And the reason is that it really is just a very, very good business practice. You're entering into an arrangement with someone for services. You're paying them, or you may not be paying them. It makes sense to have a proper paper trail of the engagement of these services. That's really literally what it amounts to. And what it does too is it helps you as an organization to minimize the risk of somebody coming forward a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later, and saying, well, I didn't know that my pictures would have been used for this purpose, that purpose. I didn't know they would have been used outside of Trinidad. So it's a proper, and I recommend it, irrespective of the state of the law, to enter into these releases so that you're entering into relationship on a sound footing.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Carla Parris, attorney at law, giving us an idea on some of the things you need to know about photographs heading into the Carnival season. This is the Business of Carnival on CTV.